Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the host of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. No matter where you are in the world, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes of your day to hear my thoughts. As always, we have a great show for you today. Now, here are our topics. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. For today's episode, I am joined by a special guest. You know, normally when you tune into Independent Thought, we are covering mostly the national politics. But today, you know, as a resident of Missoula, Montana, I felt it was necessary to do some local politics. And I have a local political candidate coming on the show today, Mr. Jacob Elder. Thank you for coming on Independent Thought. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Desmond. I want to thank you for allowing me to come on your show and for me to share my thoughts and my campaign platform with our community. So thank you very much, Desmond.
Yeah, thank you. Jacob is running to be the mayor of Missoula. And, you know, obviously I have a lot of questions here for you. And, you know, I reached out to the community as well and asked them for some questions. But, you know, before we get into all the questions about, you know, why you're running and some of your stances on the issues here in Missoula, I thought it was important to ask some more personal questions so that people can get to know you a little bit. So could you just tell us a little bit? I was reading some of your bio, you know, on your Instagram page, and I read that you actually aren't originally from America. Could you tell me a little bit about where you grew up at originally?
Right, thanks. So I was born in a small African country on the west coast of Africa called Liberia. I was born in the capital. The capital is called Monrovia, named after James Monroe. And the way Liberia was founded, so Liberia, before Liberian came to be known as a nation, Liberia was this small parcel of land on the west coast of Africa, inhabited by locals, the indigenous people. And so then after slavery was abolished, there was a group of Americans, free slaves, that were sort of lingering around in America and not being able to find work or what have you. And so James Monroe and others created an organization called the American Colonization Society. And that society was designated to send some of the free slaves back to Africa, free slaves that were willing to travel back to Africa. So a group of these free slaves got on a ship and went back to Africa. And one of the first places they landed was on this parcel of land, now known as Liberia. The free slaves got in with the natives, and within a short period, the free slaves took over the country. And so the first 13 presidents of Liberia were all born in America.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of the Liberian traditions are sort of tailored after the America's traditions. The government same sort of set up. The Liberian flag, it's the same as the American flag, except it has one star. The capital, again, Monrovia, is named after James Monroe. Some of the counties are named after states in America. So you have Maryland County. You have a place in Liberia called Miami. And so there's a lot of rich history there. So often Liberia is referred to as the stepchild of America. So I was born in Liberia. So again, the history of Liberia up until 1989, the descendants of the free slaves ran the country all the way up until 1989. The natives got sick and tired of the descendants of the free slaves running the country because, again, there was inequality in wealth and what have you. So the natives rebelled, and a civil war broke out in 1989. And so I was born in the heat of the war. My biological father took off and left my mother with a bunch of young kids, my twin brother and I, and 6 other siblings. And that's where my life started. So my mom being a single mother, we navigated the war, moving from refugee camp to refugee camp just to get away from the war. So we finally homesteaded in this rundown soccer stadium. We homesteaded on the stairwell. My mom had a little tarp that she put around where we stayed, and to sort of create some privacy. And so that's where I spent a good portion of the first part of my life in Liberia.
Wow, I did not know the details about your story there. That is that is a story, to say the very least. I'm sure that definitely has shaped a lot of your decision making, as you kind of like transition here to being a political candidate now. When you eventually left Liberia and moved to Montana, what kind of like transition was like that for you? I mean, was that how did that shape you as a person moving to Montana?
Oh man. So sometimes it's hard to put our finger on it, but part of us knows that where we live, the places in which we spend our time, play a part in shaping who we are. So my experience living in Helena was no different. I'm the man I am today because of the wonderful people I encountered growing up in Helena. I remember when we first got to Montana, we flew into Billings, Montana during the winter. Now imagine straight from Africa where temperatures are extremely high and it's humid. It's a tropical area. And then
Yeah.
showed up in Billings, Montana in November and looking outside and seeing, and by the way, Liberia is also very flat in a lot of places. But seeing the mountains, the snow-capped mountains, and the cold, that was I was scared. As a child, I was scared. I did not know what was going on.
Yeah.
At some point, I thought I was even on a foreign planet. But when we got to Helena, the people in our community took us in and treated us as just another one of the community members. People were very generous to us. I'm who I am today because of all the people that came together to help me and my twin have the best experience growing up.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. I also moved here from a different place. I grew up originally over in the East Coast, so moving to Montana, it also felt like a foreign planet when I first got here. So I know exactly what you're saying. When you eventually made your transition here to Missoula, I know for me, that was quite the culture shock just moving from a different part of Montana coming to Missoula. But I fell in love with this place. For you personally, like, what is one of the things that you love the most about Missoula since you've been here?
Boy, well, yeah, as you said, I'm not from Missoula. I grew up in Helena, which is a beautiful place. But I've lived all over the country, and I've seen and a lot of different places when traveling around the country and also around the world. I don't think any of the other places I've stayed will make the same impression on me as Missoula did when I first arrived here 10 years ago. So in Missoula, people appreciate local places and nature. We have local shopping, which is promoted in our community. People shop locally to contribute to the local economy. They also get real product for their buck. And also the markets abound in Missoula. In the summer, we have two major farmer markets, which both are downtown and the People's Market. So all of the vendors are from around the area. Also, mountains can be seen in any direction, no matter where you turn here in Missoula. But there's also another part of Missoula that is near and dear to me. It's our art. So local musicians, you go downtown, you find people playing music on the sidewalks and during the farmers market. There's also First Friday for every first Friday of the month to showcase local artists. I mean, I must not forget about the coffee. Uh, we have great coffee here in Missoula. So Missoula will always be home to me.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like a home to me too. I've been here personally for about, 11 years now. I absolutely love this community. And, unfortunately, didn't get to spend a whole lot of time in the community uh, during this past year because of coronavirus. And during that time, I, like a lot of other people, I'm sure, just ended up watching lots of Netflix because, that's just what you do when you're quarantined. So, to that end, uh, I was wondering, I actually had someone ask me this personally because they were telling me that found out that like Stacey Abrams really liked, Star Trek and they felt like a instant connection to her. So just kind of on that level, what are some of the favorite like TV shows or movies that you ended up watching this last year, like, when you were in the quarantine like the rest of us?
Well, being in law school and also getting my master's in public administration and running a political campaign, I'm left with little to none free time in my day. So I did not watch any TV show or movies. Actually, I haven't had a TV in 5 years. I got rid of my TV 5 years ago when I decided.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I just it became too much for me. I wanted to focus on other things that I thought was more important than watching TV. But one of my all-time favorite movies, The Blind Side. Uh,
Oh,
the
okay.
blind, the blind side, my gosh, there's just so many lessons to learn there. You sort of, some of the lessons that I took away from the blind side. In a lot of ways, my story is sort of similar to the character in the blind side. Being taken in by a family and being afforded opportunities to become what I want to become, what I wanted to become. But some of the lessons that I took away from the blind side, it was one to trust your instincts, expect the unexpected, but also, don't let others' opinions bring you down. And you are never fully dressed without a smile.
I
uh,
like that.
but also, friends come and go, but family is forever. And family to me is something that's very important. And also, with a little hard work and dedication, you can do anything you set your mind to. And that's sort of been my philosophy throughout my adult years.
I love it. So, finally, as we're wrapping up these kind of personal questions here, I have to ask you if you have like a couple of different places that you like to eat in Missoula. There's so many different places that you can choose from. So tell me, what are a couple places that you find yourself like going to regularly in this town?
Oh man. Well, there's just too many places to choose, good places to choose from, Desmond. We have to name a few. Market on Front, I love it there. Mar Bar, it's a great place. Montana Club, Tamarack, Pangea, Paul's Pancake, and of course, Big Dipper. I mean, there's just so many places, Desmond, and it's hard to just pick two. So.
It is. It is. I was trying to, corner you there with that one. But
Okay. Well,
all right. Well, so now, we've asked you a couple personal questions. So now, I think it's, important to kind of transition into the part of the episode where we talk about, your campaign here. So I just want to ask you a few questions, primarily about like your, the kind of like different pillars you have of your campaign. But before we get into that, specifically, why did you decide to run for mayor and not like a different elected position in the local government?
right. That's a great question, Desmond. So I do see my journey to becoming Missoula mayor as a calling than ambition or anything else. And I can't say it's planned. I don't know which of those definitions fit. But I think they all might be right to a certain extent. I think it might be some uncertain calculus that sort of leads us to where we are. So leadership. So my decision to run for mayor came about 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I was in college. I was playing football for the University of Montana, and out of the blue, I decided I was going to quit playing football and drop out of school and go into the military. After I had that strong calling to someday serve as mayor in our community, and since 2013 and up to this point, I've the thought of serving our community as their mayor has essentially dominated my life. So again, it's not an ambition, but it's more of a calling, and I believe that I think when you are called upon to do a job, you do it the best you can, and when it's over, you go away, and you just be grateful for the opportunity and that you had a chance to do it. That is it. However, our mayor does not appear to believe that his time is up, and so my question, though, that I've always thought about for our mayor is what is it that he didn't accomplish in his 14 years as mayor that he believed that he will be able to accomplish in the next 4 years. So again, I think Missoulians ought to avoid short-sighted voting in this election to have a chance to influence Missoula's discourse. So my personal concern is, and over the years, how the results of the mayoral election, where the mayor has won consistently throughout the years. So my concern is sometimes I think people find out through polls or fingers to the wind, which so I suppose attention to prevailing trends where people are going, and then they jump in front of them and call them leaders, and call themselves, and also those folks call themselves leaders. I don't think that is what leader is. I think a leader has to have some principles that they believe in that are important to them. So in order to persuade people, I think you certainly also need to have the ability to communicate to them. But above all, when it is not looking really good, you need some courage. I think it was as though my whole life was a mere preparation for this moment. It's important to run for this position. Is to have courage. But I think you also need to hold, even when you are being tempted by praise, you need to remain firm in principle. When you're being beaten by criticism, you need to be principled. So what gave me courage to push through my times in Liberia? I think there was something in me that said, no matter what I'm going to, what was going on, I was going to stand up. And I think that leadership, perhaps first and foremost, requires fortitude. And because of my experiences growing up and what I've taken from Liberia and my time in America, is added to my traits to be the better candidate for this position.
Well, I appreciate that mentality, and it is no denying the fact that our current mayor has been in office for quite some time. And I definitely plan on asking you about that more specifically a little bit later here. But, just for some background information, I know that I personally, while I try to stay involved in politics, I'm not always entirely aware of the specifics of the duties of each office. So I thought for maybe people like me who are listening right now, could you just explain for us really quickly what exactly does the mayor have authority over here in Missoula?
Right. So I have the city's charter open up here, but just so our city charter states that the executive function of the city government shall be exercised by the mayor, who shall be nominated and elected on a nonpartisan basis by the electors of Missoula. So first, I want to remind people that the mayoral election is nonpartisan, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican or everything far in between. The mayoral election is nonpartisan. The mayor is supposed to represent our city as a nonpartisan mayor, but obviously that hasn't been the case over the years. But some duties of the mayor, and reading off of the city's charter, the mayor shall execute all ordinances and resolutions passed by the city council. The mayor also shall execute all documents on behalf of the city following approval by the city council. The mayor shall have the day-to-day responsibility of administering the affairs of the city. The mayor may appoint and remove with the consent of the city council all department heads in accordance with law. So those are a few of the mayor duties. Actually, the executive officer of the city, and he's again responsible for the day-to-day activities of the city.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. I know that I definitely appreciate that. Because sometimes, like I think, like in a broad sense, like what the mayor does, but having a little more specifics definitely, helps. And now I want to kind of like transition a little bit to the specifics of your campaign. I noticed that when I was on your account, kind of like looking at your Instagram page, you kind of have like five different, I guess I'll call them pillars of your campaign. So I kind of just was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about each of them. So I'm just going to go in order here from how I saw them. Could you just tell us a little bit more about your ideas around affordable childcare and why that's important to you?
Right. So as a student, I've seen some of my classmates that have young children and having to balance out parenting and attending law school, and the struggle that some of those people face. So affordable childcare to me is near and dear. As one who grew up, my first part of my life in Africa was a single mother, and knowing how much she struggled. But again, and then having friends and seeing people, in our community that working 2, 3 jobs and then trying to parent, how tough that is. So I think to address this issue in our administration, so we will focus on local restrictions on childcare businesses. So local restrictions on childcare businesses, they are associated with significantly higher costs. In our administration, we will focus on removing burdensome zoning, building health and safety regulations, such as restrictions on daycare in residential areas, which make essentially make childcare more costly, but doesn't really meaningfully improve quality. So that's in a nutshell what we're going to focus on in terms of affordable childcare.
Perfect. And the second thing I saw here was you were talking about job creation. Tell us a little bit more about your ideas around job creation and what you plan to do to kind of stimulate that in our economy, which I know is definitely something that everyone's thinking about as, we're kind of on the tail end here of coronavirus.
Yeah, our local businesses are the backbone of our economy. I've always believed this. I believe we should invest in our local businesses. Currently, the issue that we're seeing is some of our local businesses are being taxed out of business. So I'm not in the business to push our local businesses out of town for whatever reason. So I will work closely with our local businesses and listen to their appeal and try to come up with a means that will work for them and our community. We want to keep people employed in our city, and we want to keep money in our economy here, in our local economy. So working alongside our local businesses to come up with plans that work for everyone would be something that we will focus on.
Absolutely. All right. And see, the third thing we have here is you have down reasonable taxes. Now, I am already excited to hear more about this. So please tell me what exactly your ideas are around reasonable taxes, because I think this is something that we could all kind of, be very interested in, especially as, property taxes keep raising everyone's rents here in the city.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, taxes are important. Obviously, cities rely on taxes to carry out their functions. Taxes, the tax system can be abused, and that's just not something that anyone could disagree about. If they can, then I would encourage people to look into the tax system. So Missoula's high burden of taxation is a direct result of its excessive government growth. Again, I've looked at the numbers. The government has increased by well over 100 employees in the last 2 to 3 years. So that's a problem. But I'm also for the government increasing, as necessary. So as a rule, a fiscally conservative budget means spending grows at most the rate of economic growth. So population plus inflation growth. What I've seen from my research and talking to people in our community, Missoula has far outpaced this measure over the last decade, which has created a greater need for taxes. So as mayor, I will focus on spending growth consistent with the level of economic growth. So then in this sense, this will align the city budget with the growth of the community. So again, you shouldn't spend more than what you have coming in. So we want to spend less for more services.
Okay, I mean, I understand where you're coming from with that. Now, the next topic that you have listed on your account there is mental health services. This is something I was very interested in because I personally feel as though mental health services are not funded well enough. But I kind of want to just hear what are your ideas on improving the mental health services here in the community?
That's another great question, Desmond. Thank you. Mental health services is something that's very near and dear to me. After spending 4 years in the military and in the Marine Corps and getting out in 2017, from 2017 up to last year, I've lost 7 of my friends that I served with to PTSD, suicide. They took their own lives, and so mental health to me is something so important. So I'll just throw some statistics at you, just kind of give you a sense of how dire the situation is. According to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, so NAMI, NAMI, approximately 1 in 5 Americans experience experiences some type of mental illness each year. About 10% experience serious mental illness that significantly interferes with one or more major life activities. So mental health can make life unbearable, for people who have them. So at the same time, Desmond, these problems can have a wider effect on society as a whole, speaking more locally on our community as a whole, especially when they go untreated or treatment is delayed. So as mayor, I will ensure that our friends suffering from mental health issues get the help they need. Our policy then will encourage community partners and nonprofit service providers to collaborate and come up with data-driven solutions that will help tackle this issue and slow the spread of, slow the rate of mental health issues in our community.
I love it. Thank you for, spending time to address this issue particularly. I think it's such an important issue that needs to be addressed, in every community, but especially in this one as well. The final thing that I see here on your account is housing affordability, which is kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to issues here in Missoula. As far as your ideas on housing affordability, what does your administration plan to do to address this topic, which for most Missoulians is like their number one issue right now?
Right, rightfully so. So you don't have to look far to see again our housing crisis here. The average home sales price has jumped exponentially over the last few years. I think about a working family, or a young family, starting out and having to buy a home. They can't afford it. It's the homes are too expensive, and also people that are pinching their dollars. People living paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford to live here, but yet we have people from outside that can come here and pay cash and purchase a home. That is not okay. So Missoula's crisis of affordability, from my research and talking to people in the community, really results from regulatory policies that inhibit growth and restrict the supply of housing. So currently, the scale of supply and demand, we have more demand than supply. So what we across the country, we know that areas with the highest rate of homelessness are the places where it's difficult to build, Desmond. To change this, we will focus on, again, easing zoning and building restrictions to allow for needed growth. Obviously, we're going to take into account parcels that are designated as conservation lands and agricultural lands. We're not going to be interfering with those areas, but such as, we want to reduce restrictions on minimum lot sizes, parking requirements, accessory dwelling units, and low-cost housing options. So in this sense, hopefully we'll be able to tackle some of the issues. But again, that's in a nutshell. We're going to come out with a more comprehensive plan to address this issue.
Absolutely. So, as we transition to, questions from local Missoulians now, before we do that, I want to take a quick break. And after we come back from the break, we're going to have more questions, with Jacob Elder.
Hey, Indie Thought listeners. Has this past year helped you rediscover your creative and crafty side? Well, then you're going to love our sponsor for today's episode. Bathing Beauty's Beads is a full-service bead shop in the heart of downtown Missoula. Whether it's seed beads, semi-precious stones, vintage beads, or just materials to make a project, they have something for every person and every price range. Not from Missoula? Don't worry. They have an extensive online store and they will ship directly to you. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, they'll welcome you and help you make your next project a reality. You can find them online at Bathing Beauty's Beads on Instagram and Facebook, or at bathingbeautiesbeads.com. And don't forget to use offer code INDEPENDENTTHOUGHT at checkout to save 15% on your order.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us for another episode of Independent Thought. We are still joined here by our guest, mayoral candidate from Missoula, Montana, Jacob Elder. Now, in the previous segment, we were asking you questions about, why exactly you are running for mayor, but now I want to ask you some specific questions that were posed to me from local Missoulians. For those of you who follow me on Instagram at Independent Thought, you'll know that I asked quite a few of you recently for some questions to ask our candidate here. And so I have a list of some of these questions here that I'm going to now ask Mr. Elder. Most of you will know that you asked me about his plan to address the housing crisis, which I think he just answered. So we'll just skip over that one. But the next most asked question by some local people here in the city, in the community, is what is your stance on reallocating funds away from the police department and investing them in other community programs?
Right. That's again. This is a fighting question in a sense where I feel as though our country is split, down the middle on how people perceive abolishing the police force or defunding the police. So I've received several messages from people in our community. I've received messages about asking to abolish the police when as mayor. I also received messages about defunding the police as mayor. And I've also received messages from, on the contrary, of people saying, I hope you don't defund the police or abolish the police. I'm not in the business of defunding our police department or unnecessarily defunding our police department. I think abolishing the police is insanity. And I think I spoke to you. And so, of course, the biggest losers when you do abolish the police or unnecessarily defund the police will be low income communities where you already have the high rising crime rate. But also, too, another thing to keep in mind, I think the police themselves, when they realize that they are politicians who will throw them to the wolves rather than confront the loud people that are screaming. So when the police realize that politicians don't have their back, as you would expect, they would pull back. And they might not be able to do their job effectively. So reallocating funds to different programs. This isn't unique to the police department only. In our local government, as mayor, we will do audits of the different departments. Now, if the department is overfunded or spending unwisely, we will take some of the funds and reallocate it to other departments that need the money the most. And that is not, again, target at our police department. If our police department isn't overfunded or for any of those reasons, I'm not in the game of taking money away from the police department just because. I believe that to keep our community safe, which is one of the duties of the city, we ought to have a police department that is well equipped, well trained, and ready to respond to crisis. Or respond to your call. So I think as a community, we ought to think about the unintended consequences of reallocating funds from the police department when not necessary. Again, that's where I stand.
Okay. No, I can understand your position on that. Personally, I just want to also say that I think that abolishing the police is also not a smart idea. And, the idea that you would want to kind of audit every department and kind of just reallocate funds as you're seeing where there's excess, that makes sense versus just targeting just one specific program from the outset, especially when you're not even a part of the government yet. You can't see all the specific numbers. I totally understand where you're coming from on that. The next question that I have from local Missoulians is, what is your plan to help the homeless population?
Right. So homelessness is obviously it's a human issue and it's extremely complex. A lot of the cities around the country have tried to obviously decrease the homeless population, and most have been unsuccessful. But Utah, Salt Lake City, has been one of the only cities that have actually effectively decreased their homeless population, although that population is again increasing. So one of the things that I think about, and I take from the Maslow hierarchy of needs, for an individual to reach their full potential, they need to have certain needs met. And one of the needs is to have housing. So we cannot address a lot of our homeless crisis if we don't address housing affordability for our people in our community. So we will come up with ways that we can address this multifaceted, complex human issue with compassion and empathy, but also with data-driven results. You know, we're not just going to jump into any sort of premature plans and move forward. We will again look at other communities that have been effective in addressing this issue, and where our policy would be somewhat tailored after those programs. But we care about, again, we care about people that are experiencing homelessness in Missoula, and it's something that we will address when we hit the ground first day in the mayoral office.
No, that's great to hear because this is definitely an issue that is affecting so many people. So, I mean, just, people who are homeless, and it's also affecting people who are, just trying to figure out what they can do to better help the homeless population. So I think it's very important that your administration plans to address this from the very beginning. One of the next questions that we have from local Missoulians here kind of regards Missoula's climate policy. I think the person in particular asked in regards to Missoula City Council back in January of 2013 passed a resolution where they were planning to have Missoula carbon neutral during this decade. So in that regard, what are your thoughts on reducing Missoula's carbon emissions, and would that be a priority of your administration?
Yeah, I'm not against it, Desmond. But one of the things that you often see in our city government is, people making decisions without an action plan or without accountability. So if people can bring in an action plan that includes merits and how we will succeed in accountability, I would be all about it. But we have to have accountability. We have to have an action plan that addresses unintended consequences. We have to have, again, the effectiveness of the plan. And so if those things are adequately addressed in the proposal, I'll be in favor of supporting the plan. I just want to remind people of the plan outlines conservation and climate change strategies in 3 focus areas and offers some information on them. So I'm not against it, but I would want to see that the plan has accountability, unintended consequences, and metrics to get the job done.
All right, I understand that completely. The next question that I have from local Missoulians here is, there are a lot of women in this community who are concerned with public safety. I know that quite a few have reached out and talked about how sexual assault is still quite a huge issue in this community, as it is in a lot of other places in our country. But what are your administration's plans to kind of address, public safety as a whole so that more people can feel safe in this community?
Again, what I stated about ensuring that our police department is well equipped and trained to address these issues. Working closely with our police departments, working closely with the shelters in Missoula, and coming up with data-driven solutions to address this issue will be my focus. But I also think about some ways that we as individuals could help ensure that people feel safe in the community. So I always think about our vulnerable population, and we think about women in our community. So when you're walking at night, keep your distance away from people if they feel uncomfortable. Don't run up behind them or do things that are going to make them uncomfortable. But also be an active bystander. Don't encourage people that are doing things that it shouldn't be doing, and you stand there and not say anything or do anything. So I think it's all of our responsibilities to ensure that we have a safe community. And so being a good citizen, helping out when needs be, and also don't go about causing problems for anyone. But obviously our police department and our social programs and community activists are working with those folks to come up with a plan that will keep our community safe.
All right. Well, thank you for addressing that. I know that a lot of people are definitely concerned about that issue. And the final question that I have is actually my personal question, because I'm also a citizen of Missoula. But do you plan to implement term limits for the mayor's office when if you were to be elected? I am highly interested in your answer here because, our current mayor has been in office for a long time, and I did not know until recently that that is one of the reasons for that is because the mayor's office currently does not have any term limits, which I think is horrendous. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Desmond, uh, there's obviously a variety of arguments for term limits and the pros and cons of term limits. I'm all for term limits, not against, but for it. I think term limits restricts. Let me rephrase that. So restricting the service of lawmakers, after a certain time in office, prevents politicians from amassing too much power, and that's just the case when you have one guy who's been mayor for close to 16 years. He amassed too much power. He creates these little groups that die-hard supporters that will be willing to do anything to cover up for their guy in power. But also, when you have a mayor who's been in office for about 16 years, he becomes sort of distant from his constituents, and but also, I think most importantly, becomes complacent. In the military, in the Marines, in the military, we have a term called the fog of war. And what the fog of war is, after you've been in combat for X amount of hours or days, you start to become complacent, and complacency kills. When it's necessary, you should retreat and let the next person in line take over, or perhaps pass on the baton to the next person who, with fresh perspectives, that is energetic, that it has a vision to move the city to the next phase in life. So again, term limits are, I believe, are very important, and it's something that I'm open to.
Okay, great. So, that is all the questions we have now from local Missoulians. Thank you for taking the time to answer all of those. As we're transitioning into this kind of like final part of, the episode here, one of the questions that I'm always interested in whenever I'm listening to an interview with a political candidate is where the candidate kind of contrasts themselves from who they're running against. And so, to that effect, that's the question I have for you now. So, in contrasting yourself with our current mayor, how does Missoula look different under your administration than the current one?
I believe that Mayor Engen and I don't share much in common. First, my life started back in a war-torn country in Africa, and then I got sort of ejected out of that and placed in Helena, Montana. So I got to see a different culture growing up in Africa. Got to see what it's like to live in a place where people lack opportunities, even their fundamental rights. I got to see people living at their lowest. I mean, I told you, I stated earlier that I spent a good number of the first part of my childhood living under a stairwell in a soccer stadium, so living essentially homeless and poor. So that experience, tailored with my experience growing up in Helena and my experience in the military and traveling overseas and interacting with different cultures, enabled me to have a wide range of perspectives on society and on life as we see it. So in that sense, that sort of contrasts me from the mayor. But also, I'm an empiricist, which means I examine the facts before making a diagnosis, and then hopefully recommending a treatment for the perceived problem. Then I give you a prognosis, and so that's sort of how I go about making decisions. I'm not as concerned, if at all, about how people view or the consequences of my statement in terms of contemporary politics. So also, I may be a contrarian in a sense that I gravitate towards places that are unpopular or plagued by false knowledge or myths, because it intrigues me to see if the common belief, if it is real or is true. And I always also discover that it isn't. I don't make friends or enemies based on tribal loyalty or public opinion. One of the reasons that I'm pushing that people vote nonpartisan in this election. I'm reminded of a quote though that by Thomas Sowell, longtime economist, and he states that it takes considerable knowledge just to realize the extent of your own ignorance. So,
It's pretty profound.
so Mayor Engin's administration is best described as a garbage can model, and that's in public administration. So what that means is organizations operate in a garbage can model. Organizations operate on the basis of inconsistent and ill-defined preferences. So their own processes are not understood by their member. They operate by trial and error. So their boundaries are uncertain and changing. Decision makers, for any particular choice, change capriciously. So what we've seen in our local government has been the garbage can model. There's no accountability, and Engin doesn't seem to care about accountability. I care about accountability. I care about transparency. I care about being honest. I care about being truthful. I care about telling it as it is. So my style is pretty much low key, Desmond. I'm a meat and potatoes guy. I don't mean by any means dietary wise, or else I'll be overweight, extremely overweight. But I'm straightforward, Desmond. You know, some people tend to be, very flamboyant or into different ways of leading. I don't pretend to be that kind of person. What you see is what you get. I'm straightforward. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. I'm not going to play games with you, and I do believe that it's critical as a mayor to have credibility. So again, Mayor Engin and I don't believe we have a whole lot in common, if at all, anything in common. So that's what I bring to the table. I bring honesty, I bring transparency, I bring accountability, and I bring deeply caring about my constituents to make decisions that are going to positively impact their lives.
All right. You know, thank you for giving us that. I think too often, like when we're having to choose between two different candidates, we don't often hear enough about like what it is that you're going to do that's different that's it's being done currently. So I appreciate you taking the time to kind of contrast a little bit here, but I want to go a little bit deeper now. You know, as far as, like your administration, like what is it that you're going to focus on that you feel like the current mayor's administration is not focusing on at all or not well enough? Like, where do you think that the current mayor is failing at that you plan to, rather, actually address it more effectively?
Right. As I said, again, I believe the mayor has become complacent after almost 16 years as mayor. One of the things that I've noticed in our community is sort of the divide in our community. And so my goal is to bring our community together, bring people together, get people talking to each other, and figuring out that, look, we have more things in common than not. But also, again, focusing on the problems at hand, responding to those problems effectively and competently. And I'll give Mayor Engin some credit. He's done some good things for our community. But at this point, we're in different times. It's time to pass on the baton to the next person in line. And I was called to be that next person. And hopefully my constituents will see that, and hopefully I'll get their vote.
Okay. And the final question that I have here is, what do you think will happen to Missoula if John Engen gets reelected?
Right. So I can't predict the future, Desmond. But I think one of the things that we should be concerned about if Mayor Engen gets elected, you're going to have a lack of intellectual honesty. You're going to have a lack of decisions that are based on relevant data and following the facts to their logical conclusion. And even that conclusion turns out to be unpopular. But secondly, the importance of not electing Engen again is that, the issues, our homeless crisis, the issues we see in homelessness, in housing affordability, in affordable taxes. Engen has increased taxes since he's been in office. He said he would, and he's done just so. And so all those things that we can expect if we elect Engen again. It's time for a new leadership, and I'm ready to lead our city in a prosperous direction.
Okay, I love it. I mean, I'll just speak for myself here currently, but I definitely feel as though our city could use a different direction. As somebody who's lived here for 11 years now, I definitely think that Missoula could use a different administration. So thank you for taking the time to answer all of these questions so far. And, before I get you out of here, I just wanted to ask you a couple just kind of like wrap up questions. And, this next question is a question that I spoke to you about previously. I wasn't even sure if I was going to ask you or not because the question is something that you know, I'm just, it made me slightly uncomfortable to ask you, but, I'm going to do it anyway. So,
Fire it away, Desmond.
yeah. How do you feel about potentially being the first Black person to be the mayor of Missoula?
Yeah. So I don't think in those terms. I really don't. However, I tend to focus on what we have in common. So what we have in common is what transcends race, and that's it's that we all desire to be loved. We all desire to have our needs met. We all desire to feel safe in our communities. We all desire to prosper, and those are the things that we have in common. So I think race to me will transcend everything that we know at this moment in history. So my thought is never about being the first Black man to become mayor. My thought is being the first person, being the guy that will change Missoula's discourse for the better.
I love it. And again, I almost didn't ask you that question because I feel like race, like while it's an important issue, it's an issue that, as someone who's also a person of color, I mean, I get annoyed how often it is a part of our everyday dialogue. It feels like I don't want to be reminded that, I'm Black every single, like minute of the day, but I feel like our current politics wants to do just that. So,
Right.
but thank you for kind of expanding your thoughts on that. The last question I have for you for today is if you are elected, what kind of legacy do you want to leave from being the mayor of Missoula?
Hmm. I think that thinking about legacy is thinking too highly of yourself. So I think it's about the job, Desmond. The decisions that you make, and you try to make sure that you do it right. You do your job. Just do it competently, and when your time is up, you go away. And let the history will speak for itself. But I'm not into thinking about legacy or those things. I do want to inspire the next generations of leaders in Missoula, and to ensure that our community will stay on the path that will create opportunities for others to come. And eventually, Desmond, I will start a family here in Missoula. My kids will grow up here. This is home, and I will hope that they will live in a society that they will have opportunities to pursue their goals and the American dream. And so those are the things that I care about as opposed to legacy.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show today, Jacob. As we're closing out this episode, could you just let everyone know like how they can follow along with your campaign online, like maybe your website, where they can follow you on social media? Tell everyone where we can keep up with you during the rest of your campaign here.
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram at Jacob Elder for Missoula Mayor. On Facebook, again, Jacob Elder for Missoula Mayor. But actually, Instagram is Elder for MT. So Elder FOR MT. And for Facebook, it would just be Jacob Elder for Missoula Mayor. And also, please, Mayor Engen has had almost 16 years of publicity. His powerful friends. He's got connections, and so he's been in the media for 16 years. But we will need exposure for us to beat Mayor Engen. So the only way we can do that is by you donating, by grassroots support, by you donating, say $10, $20, $50, and upwards of $180. That's the max. To donate, if you follow us on Instagram or on Facebook, you'll see that our website link is on there. Please donate however much you can. It will help boost our campaign to win this race. Again, I thank you for your support and your encouragement. Without you, none of this would be possible. So please trust the process and keep following us. I can assure you that I'm working tooth and nail to ensure that we have new leadership come September. The primaries in September. The general election is in November of this year, 2021. So please continue to follow us, spread the message, and donate.
All right. And if you are listening to this episode right now, you can scroll up into the episode notes. I will have all the links that were just mentioned in the episode notes. So make sure that you can scroll up to see those links. And if you are a resident here in Missoula, please share this episode on your social media with your friends. Just if you like this episode, if you are somebody who is going to vote in this election, please share this episode so that more people in the community can hear this conversation. And don't forget to register to vote. I want to thank Jacob Elder for coming onto the podcast. It is very much appreciated. Hope to have you back on again in the future. We are going to take our final break of the episode, and I'll be right back with my final thoughts. Stay tuned. Welcome back from our final break of today's episode. Thank you for everyone who stuck with and listened to the entire episode. I first want to thank my guest, Jacob Elder, for coming on to the podcast. Thank you for coming on and talking about your platform and your vision for Missoula. As a Missoulian, I was very, happy to have you on. You're welcome to come on again in the future. And, for everyone out there who listened to this episode, despite the fact that you don't live in Montana, I want to appreciate, that time that you took as well. Thank you so much. These aren't your local politics, but I do believe that being invested in local politics is the most important thing that we can do as far as being engaged in politics is concerned. Local politics affect us the most, in my opinion. With that being said, I also want to thank our sponsor for this week, Bathing Beauties Beads. Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. If you did not, please go check out our ad in between the first and second segment to listen to that great commercial that was done by our voice actress, Jasmine Sherman. Thank you so much for creating that commercial for us. I also want to thank the patrons, all 23 members of my Patreon. You guys are amazing. I'm almost at my goal of having 30. I will soon be getting new audio equipment for those of you who keep messaging me about how my audio is not good enough. New audio equipment is coming. And finally, thank you to all the subscribers, the people who tune in each and every week, who DM me each and every week. If you want to, you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Independent Thought. Those are the places that are the best ways to keep up with me and the podcast. I should have daily updates on Instagram, so feel free to follow me on Instagram. Now, the next episode that'll be coming out next week will be another locally based episode. I'll be interviewing Daniel Carlino, who is running for city council out of Ward 3 here in Missoula. So make sure that you're subscribed so that you see that, hear that episode as well. And there will be some more bonus content on the horizon. So make sure that you are subscribed to hear these bonus episodes as they pop up. I was supposed to have one this past week. It didn't quite get finished on time, but it will be coming very shortly. And finally, make sure that if you are, especially if you're living in the Missoula area, please make sure that your registration is up to date. Make sure you're registered to vote. Sometimes, these things can lapse for reasons that, well, they can just happen. So make sure that you are registered to vote. I put a link down in the episode notes, vote.org. I think that's a great resource for checking your registration and registering through any state if you need to. So click that link if you need to check on your registration if you're not sure whether or not you are registered. So to everyone who listened, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Independent Thought. If this was your first time, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. for everyone. I will see you in the next episode.